Leave me alone, Amara screamed, her small hand pressing down on the chest of the unconscious man. Thomas Whitmore, the famous millionaire businessman, lay slumped in the first-class seats. His face was pale, his head was tilted to one side. The oxygen mask dangled loosely. The plane shook violently. Luggage slammed against the ceiling. Screams, prayers. The flight attendant shouted, "Everyone, sit down immediately!" Amara heard nothing. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. She was only 12 years old. This was her first flight, a girl from the New Carver slums. And now she was trying to save a stranger's life. Thomas hiccuped lightly. His eyes fluttered open. He looked directly at her, struggled to lift his trembling arm, then whispered, "Amara, I am your father." 3 hours earlier, Amara stood alone in the terminal of JFK International Airport, clutching her worn-out backpack. The plane ticket, printed on thin paper, trembled in her hand. New York, London. Seat 27A, her first time leaving America, her first time leaving Mrs. Ruth. The 12-year-old girl from the New Carver neighborhood, where the streetlights were always broken and the sound of police sirens was louder than the morning birds. The place where Mrs. Ruth always reminded her, never trust anyone who gives you something without asking again. But this time it was Mrs. Ruth herself who insisted she go. A letter from London, a notification of a will, a strange name, Thomas Whitmore. "It could be a mistake," Mrs. Ruth said softly, sitting on the sickbed, her eyes red. "Or maybe it's fate." Amara wasn't sure if she believed in fate, but she knew one thing. Everything would change. Forever. Amara boarded the plane, her eyes scanning the cabin as if entering another world. Leather seats, soft yellow lighting, quiet conversations in languages she had never heard before. "Are you traveling alone?" the flight attendant smiled and asked. Amara nodded, a chill running down her spine. She handed over her ticket. 27A. A window seat near the back of economy class. As she passed through first class, she saw him. An older man with silver hair, perfectly tailored black suit, and a heavy gold watch on his wrist. Sitting upright, no smile, no words. His eyes were fixed on the window as if chasing a memory somewhere among the clouds. They locked eyes for a second. Then he turned away, but in that moment Amara felt something strange. It was as if he recognized her, as if she wasn't entirely a stranger to him. Amara sat down in seat chapter 7A. The entire row was empty. She sighed in relief. At least she didn't have to talk to anyone. She pulled out an old notebook from her backpack, its spine cracked. On the first page was a letter, carefully folded. "Amara Wells, we respectfully invite you to London to claim the inheritance related to Mr. Thomas Whitmore. Your flight and expenses have been paid. Confidentiality is required." No explanation, no signature, just the red seal of a law firm. Amara had once thought it was a scam, but when Mrs. Ruth saw the name Whitmore, her face turned pale. "It can't be," she whispered. Amara didn't dare ask, and Mrs. Ruth didn't say more. Now in the air, with the letter in hand, and in an unsettling feeling growing in her chest, Amara began to wonder, who am I really? The plane leveled out in the sky. Soft light from the window illuminated the pages of Amara's well-worn copy of The Secret Garden, Mrs. Ruth's favorite book. She flipped through the pages without really reading them. Her mind still lingered on the moment when his gaze met hers. Thomas Whitmore. That man was unlike anyone Amara had ever met. Not like the old men selling drugs on the street corner, not like the weary teachers at school. He exuded something, power, secrets, caution. When the flight attendant walked past, Amara looked up. Thomas was looking at her again. Not coldly, not curiously, but as though he were trying to remember something very important, and this time he didn't turn away first. He stood up. Thomas Whitmore adjusted his coat and walked toward the restroom at the front of first class. His eyes passed over her one last time. Then something fell. A small piece of paper slipped from his jacket pocket, landing softly on the floor, right between first class and economy. No one noticed, except Amara. She hesitated, then stood up, stepped over, and picked it up. It was a photo. A young couple, African-American, standing in front of an old house. The girl had dimples on her cheek. The boy wore basically a Howard University shirt. They were smiling, a gaze as clear as early summer sunlight. Amara froze. She knew that face, those dimples. She would seen them every morning in the mirror. The girl in the photo was her mother. She had never seen this photo before. And why? Was it in Thomas Whitmore's jacket pocket? Amara returned to her seat, the photo hidden inside the secret garden. Her hands were still trembling. Her mother, Celeste Wells, had disappeared when Amara was 7. No goodbyes, no trace. And now a wealthy, powerful white man was carrying her mother's photo in his coat pocket. An old photo, worn at the corners, well kept. She looked up. Thomas had returned to his seat. He rummaged through his jacket pocket, stopped. His eyes scanned the cabin as though looking for something. Amara's heart raced. He knew he'd dropped the photo, and she had kept it, not out of curiosity, but because of something deeper, something more vague. It was as if something was pushing her toward a truth that wasn't ready to be revealed. A question began to form in Amara's mind. If he knew her mother, then who was he to her? The intercom crackled from the cockpit. The pilot's voice was calm but deep. "We are approaching turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts." The cabin lights flickered slightly. The plane shook for the first time. Amara jumped, but her hand still clutched the book, the place where she hid the strange photo. She looked up ahead. Thomas Whitmore sat still, but his eyes were uneasy, his back slightly hunched. His fingers tapped lightly on the armrest, a man unaccustomed to losing control. The plane shook harder. Some passengers began murmuring prayers. Others held hands with the person next to them. Amara was silent, but inside her 2 storms were brewing, one between the Atlantic skies, 2 inside her with this question: why did he carry her family's photo? And what did he know about her mother? The plane shook again, stronger. A few small screams rang out behind her. Amara closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath. In her mind, Mrs. Ruth's image appeared. Her thin face, bright eyes, and hoarse, resolute voice. "The world isn't always kind to kids like you, especially when you're alone." That warning now echoed louder than ever. She remembered the night Mrs. Ruth signed the permission slip, her trembling hand, her distant gaze. "Maybe he has answers that I'm too scared to tell you. Maybe—" She paused. "Maybe you need to find out for yourself." Amara hadn't understood back then. Now amid the turbulence, her chest was full of a feeling she couldn't name, as if her life up until now had been a book. But someone had hidden the first chapter. A strong jolt caused the cup of water on the table to spill onto the floor. Amara jumped. When she opened her eyes, an older woman had sat in the seat next to her. She wore a light purple sweater, her short silver hair neatly trimmed. Her hands were adorned with many old rings, and she wore a faint scent of lavender. "First time flying?" Her voice was warm, with a touch of playful sarcasm, like someone with experience. Amara nodded. "Lillian May," she smiled, extending her hand. "I was a nurse, nearly 50 years. Don't worry, this turbulence is nothing compared to the ambulances in Harlem back in the 80s. Amara weakly smiled. "I'm Amara." "Beautiful name. Sounds like it means something." "Hope, does it?" Amara answered, her voice as quiet as a breath. Lillian nodded, her gaze as if reading more than words. "Hope will take you farther than any flight." Outside the window, the sky was a dull gray, shrouded in heavy clouds. Water droplets clung to the glass as if falling in reverse. "Are you visiting someone in London?" Mrs. Lillian asked, opening a small tin box of peppermint candies. Amara hesitated. "I'm not sure. A law firm invited me to come. For someone named Thomas Whitmore." The name caused Mrs. Lillian to pause for a moment. Then she gave a slight nod. "Sounds like the name of a rich person with complicated matters." Amara smiled faintly. "I think so." She handed Amara a candy. "Be careful with people who have a lot of money and a lot of silence. They hide more than they say." Amara took the candy, her eyes still fixed on the first-class cabin ahead. Thomas sat motionless, but his head tilted slightly, as if he were listening to something that no one else could hear. A noise came from the front, seats shifted. A flight attendant rushed to the first-class cabin. Amara straightened up. "One passenger has fainted," someone whispered from behind. "It looks serious." Mrs. Lillian leaned forward, squinting her eyes. "Definitely a heart issue," she muttered. "I noticed his skin looked very pale since the beginning of the flight." Amara felt her chest tighten. Thomas Whitmore. She didn't know why she was sure it was him, but her heart told her so. A flight attendant rushed back. "Is there a medical professional on board? We need help." Mrs. Lillian stood up, fast and steady beyond her years. "I'm a retired nurse. 47 years in the field. Take me there." She turned to Amara. "Stay seated. Don't follow." But Amara had already unbuckled her seatbelt. She didn't know why. She just knew she had to go there. Amara clutched the armrest, weaving through the narrow aisle amid the roaring engine and chaotic footsteps. Mrs. Lillian had already gone ahead, gently pushing the flight attendant aside. As Amara passed through the curtain separating economy from first class, she saw him. Thomas Whitmore. He was leaning forward, struggling to breathe, his hand gripping the armrest, his face as pale as ash. A flight attendant held the oxygen mask over his face, but his eyes never left Amara. They were wide open, bewildered, as if he had just seen something he had been searching for his whole life. Amara froze. "He's looking at you," a voice said. James Chen, the man sitting next to Thomas. "Do you know him?" Amara almost shook her head, but didn't get the chance. Thomas pulled the mask down, his lips trembling. "Amara, the photo," he whispered. His eyes were red. "You are my daughter." His words fell into the air like a stone dropped into a calm lake. All the sounds around Amara faded, leaving only the pounding of her heart echoing in her ears like war drums. A flight attendant quickly put the mask back on Thomas. "He's delirious," James Chen said softly. "Kid, go back to your seat." "I'm not delirious," Gakishtoa, Thomas cried out, gripping Amara's wrist with the little strength he had left. His eyes were bloodshot, his mouth dry. "Michael and Celeste." "Amara." "I know." The intercom crackled. The captain's voice sounded hurried. "We are encountering severe turbulence. Crew, return to your positions. All passengers fasten seatbelts immediately." The plane shook violently. Oxygen masks fell from the ceiling. Amara still stood there, eyes wide open, clutching the photo in the old book. Thomas grasped her hand again, his voice hoarse. "The key! In my jacket pocket! Go to London!" The plane swerved, and he fainted. "He's stopped responding!" a flight attendant shouted. Nurse Lillian immediately knelt beside Thomas. "I need the emergency kit. Call the ground doctor for assistance." Amara was pulled back, but her eyes never left Thomas's pale face. The photo was still in her hand. Her heart was racing. The plane shook again, a light but intense drop. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "We are diverting to Gander Airport, Newfoundland for emergency assistance. Prepare for emergency landing." The air in the cabin was thick. Worried faces, whispers of prayers. Mrs. Lillian pressed her hand to Thomas's chest and began chest compressions. 1, 2, 3. Amara staggered back to her seat, dazed. Everything was happening too fast, too real. She looked down at the old photo, now crumpled in her hand. And one question echoed in her mind. If he's my real father, then why did she hide it? The plane continued descending. There was no more loud noise, just the frantic breathing of passengers and the announcer's calm voice reminding everyone to stay calm. Amara sat motionless, her seatbelt fastened, her eyes still locked on the first-class cabin ahead. Mrs. Lillian was working tirelessly next to Thomas. One flight attendant held the oxygen mask. Another kept rhythm with the portable medical device. Thomas hadn't regained consciousness. But Amara could still hear the words he had whispered. It wasn't, "Your father is my friend." It wasn't, "I know your mother." It was, "You are my daughter." She whispered to herself, "He called my mom Celeste. But what's her real name? She never told me." A fragment of memory flashed. Mrs. Ruth's voice the night before Amara left, soft as a breeze through an old window. Celeste wasn't the girl's name from the start. Amara's heart pounded. So what else had her mother hidden? As the plane tilted right to line up for the landing, everything in the cabin shook one last time. A suitcase fell from the overhead bin, hitting the floor with a thud. Someone screamed. A flight attendant shouted, "Head down! Hands on the seat in front!" Amara ducked her head, but her eyes never left Thomas. In the midst of the case, Mrs. Lillian looked up, signaling, "It's okay. His pulse is weak but steady. He needs immediate care once we land." Thomas was still unconscious. His mouth moved slightly. Then his trembling hand reached into his inside jacket pocket. He pulled out a small object and handed it to Amara, before fainting again. It was a key, small, made of brass, attached to a smooth metal ring with no markings. Amara stared at it. It didn't look like a house key. It didn't look like a locker key. She tucked it into her pocket, her hand clenching tightly. In her mind, 2 words repeated like a heartbeat. London, decoding. The plane's wheels hit the runway with a sharp jolt. The sound of the tires screeching on the wet runway. Passengers exhaled in relief. A few clapped. But the first-class cabin was silent. Amara sat still, her body taut as a string. The captain announced, "We have successfully landed at Gander Airport, Newfoundland. Medical personnel are waiting outside the aircraft." The door opened. A blast of cold air rushed in, along with the sound of ambulance sirens. 2 medical staff in green uniforms rushed up the plane with a stretcher and equipment. The flight attendants quickly guided them. Thomas was placed on the stretcher. His eyes were closed, his face pale. The oxygen mask was put back on. Just before they pushed him past Amara, he opened his eyes. For just a second. That look, still the same as when they had first locked eyes, was pained, pleading, and father. No one said a word, but to Amara, that look was a promise left unsaid. Amara jumped up as the stretcher was pushed past her. A flight attendant stopped her. "You need to sit down. You're not allowed to leave your seat." "But I need..." She choked on the words. There was no way to explain that the man being taken away could be her real father. She sat back down, helpless, her eyes tracking his retreating figure as he disappeared through the plane door. Mrs. Lillian turned to her, sitting beside her. She handed Amara a small cup of water. "Thank you for saving him," Amara whispered. Mrs. Lillian exhaled, her gaze drifting toward the door. "He didn't want to die. I could see it in his eyes. There's still something he didn't say." Amara Geisha gripped the cup tightly. In her pocket, the key was cold. In her mind, the question swirled like a storm. Why did he have my mom's photo? Why did he know my adoptive father's name? Why did he send the invitation to London? And why wait until now? The plane had stopped. Passengers were instructed to stay seated, but all Amara could hear was the thudding of her heart and the echo of a voice. Michael and Celeste. Her adoptive father's name, Michael Wells. Her mother's name, Celeste? Or was that just the name she was known by? Mrs. Ruth once said, "There are things you don't need to know until you're older." But now she couldn't wait any longer. A flight attendant walked by. Amara looked up. "Where will Mr. Thomas Whitmore be taken?" "To James Patton Hospital," she replied. "We've notified the ground units. He will be under special observation." Amara nodded, swallowing her tremors. She reached into her pocket. The key was still there, heavy as a secret passed down. And now all that was left was her. And the truth waiting in London. In the waiting area of Gander Airport, passengers scattered. Some made phone calls, some slept slumped on the hard plastic chairs. Amara sat alone in the corner, clutching her backpack to her chest. Her phone still had signal. With one button pressed, she could call Mrs. Ruth. She had planned to call as soon as she received the key. But now, with what Thomas had said, she was scared. Scared that Mrs. Ruth would deny it. Scared that she would stay silent. But silence was also an answer. She took a deep breath and pressed the call button. "Amara?" Mrs. Ruth's voice came through, weak but still clear like a lantern in a dark alley. "I'm safe, Grandma," Amara whispered. "The plane had to make an emergency landing. Someone fainted." Silence on the other end. "His name is Thomas Whitmore." A long breath, then a single hoarse question, as if from a place far away. "What did he say to you?" Amara gripped the phone tightly. Mrs. Ruth's voice on the line felt like it was echoing from the bottom of a deep well. "He said," she hesitated, "that he is my father." Silence. No response, no shock, no surprise, just a heavy silence that pressed down like a suffocating weight. Amara closed her eyes. "Is that true, Grandma?" A long sigh came through the phone, as if Mrs. Ruth had been holding that breath for too long, ready to burst. "He was a part of your mother's life," she said softly. "Celeste's life. But he didn't know you existed. Not until it was too late." Amara opened her eyes. "Then, did Mom love him?" "She loved him enough to leave everything behind, but was also hurt enough not to ever come back." Another silence. Then Mrs. Ruth spoke again. "The key he gave you is the beginning, but you must be ready. The truth doesn't just hurt people. It also demands forgiveness." Amara sat still, the phone slipping from her hand, lying quietly on the cold plastic chair. The truth that Mrs. Ruth had just spoken didn't shock her. It only made everything slow down, as if the world had switched to silent mode. Thomas had never known she existed. Her mother had once loved him, but she left, and never told her story. Mrs. Ruth had chosen silence for 12 years. Now, he had just whispered calling her daughter, and handed her a key. She clenched it in her hand. An airport employee approached. "We've arranged your next flight to London. It will depart in 2 hours. Your luggage remains as is." Amara looked up, nodding slightly. 2 hours. 2 hours to decide, to continue or to turn back. But she already knew the answer from the moment the key touched her hand. She would go, to open the door to the past, no matter what was inside. Amara stood alone at the boarding gate. Outside, the sky was a dull gray, light snow falling onto the glass. Other passengers chatted and drank coffee or texted. But she, still gripping the key tightly in her coat pocket. The airplane before her was not just transportation, it was a boundary between what she once thought was the truth and the untold part of her life. She thought of her mother, Celeste, a name that now sounded as distant as a character in a novel. The mother she always remembered by a scent, a gentle hand, and an unexplained disappearance. She thought of Mrs. Ruth, the one who had kept her promise for 12 years, but also the one who chose to keep the first chapters of Amara's life hidden. And she thought of him. Thomas Whitmore, the man who had whispered calling her daughter. Just before falling unconscious, no map, no directions, just a key and a heart that no longer belonged to the past. Seat 14A, by the window. Amara sat still, gazing out at the sky. The snow continued to fall, quietly like things that had never been spoken. She pulled The Secret Garden from her backpack, turning to the middle page, where she had hidden the photo of her mother. Mrs. Lillian sat down beside her. It turned out she was flying on the same flight. "I asked to switch seats," she said, her voice soft as the wind, "not because I was curious, but because I thought you shouldn't travel alone." Amara looked at her, not knowing what to say. In her heart, a small feeling began to flicker. Safety. "I've seen many children lose their fathers, but I've never seen one carry a key like you." Amara lowered her head. "I don't know what it opens. It could be a safe box. It could be an old room. It could be something even the world doesn't understand about him, but it could also—" She paused, placing her hand gently over Amara's. "Be the first door leading you to yourself." The plane landed at Heathrow Airport just as night was falling. The yellow light spread evenly across the wet runway like the eyes of an old city watching a stranger step in. Amara slowly pulled her suitcase through customs. The officer asked a few short questions, then stamped her passport. No one asked who she was with. No one asked why a 12-year-old girl was alone in England. Everything went too smoothly. So smoothly that she felt something had been prearranged. In the arrivals hall, a man in a black suit held up a sign with her name in all caps, Amara Wells. She approached him. The man gave a slight bow. "I'm Alfred. Mr. Whitmore sent me to pick you up." Amara nodded, a light wave of emotion rising in her chest. Whitmore. He was still alive, still lucid enough to arrange things, still waiting for her to arrive. And now this cold London was about to reveal something she had never dared to imagine. The black car glided through the old streets of London, passing the dim gas lamps in the mist and the red brick buildings standing still in the winter. Amara sat in the back, her hands still clutching her backpack. Inside, books, photos, and the small key. Alfred didn't say much. Occasionally he glanced at the rearview mirror, his gaze still as a river at night. "We've arrived," he said when the car stopped in front of a 3-story old house at the end of a narrow street named Wexford. The black iron gate opened as they stepped inside. Alfred took out a large bundle of keys and unlocked the door. The interior was cold and quiet, as if time had stopped. The wooden floors creaked under their steps. Black and white photographs hung on the walls. Portraits of people, streets, stores, and memories. Alfred led Amara upstairs, stopping in front of a small door. "This is his room," he said softly. "And this is yours." He placed a sealed envelope in her hand. The handwriting was slanted and familiar, sending a chill through her. "Amara, the key is yours, but the truth you must find for yourself." Amara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she opened the envelope. The paper inside had yellowed, smelling faintly of old ink and time. The handwriting of Thomas was soft, yet firm, just like him. "Dear Amara, by the time you read this, I may be somewhere between two worlds. Not having said everything, but it's time for you to know. I didn't know you existed until this spring. An anonymous letter, an old photo, and a medical file led me to the unbelievable truth. Celeste had a child. And you are my daughter." Amara gasped. She placed her hand over the letter, her eyes not leaving the words. "Your mother disappeared from my world like a storm in reverse, leaving nothing but memories and a brutal silence. The key you hold opens something more important than any safe. It is the door, Ozan, to the place where your mother left the whole truth. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I only ask that you seek the truth, to understand your mother, understand me, and understand yourself, Thomas." Amara sat still for a long time after reading the letter. In her chest, something cracked open. Not pain, but something bigger, deeper, harder to name. She opened her backpack and took out the brass key. Leaving the room, she walked down the wooden hallway, every door on either side tightly shut. When she reached the end of the hall, she stopped, A white-painted door, no nameplate, no number. An old rusted lock, just right for the key in her hand. Amara took a breath. She turned the key. Click. The door opened. A scent rushed in. Dried lavender, old paper, and the dust of time. Soft yellow light from the window spilled across the wall, covered in photographs. Not of Thomas, but of a woman, Celeste, her mother, young, sad, beautiful, like the shadow of someone who hadn't yet left. In the middle of the room, a wooden table, on it a small metal box and another letter. The outside read, Amara. When you are old enough to know, you will be strong enough to forgive. Amara sat down, her hands gently resting on the metal box covered with a thin layer of dust. Her eyes lingered on the letter neatly placed beside it. The paper was a pale yellow. The handwriting, slanted and softer, was more fluid than Thomas's. It wasn't smudged. It wasn't trembling. It was as if the writer was trying to hold themselves together through an inner storm. She opened the letter. Dear Amara, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to see you grow up. But it also means you are ready to know the truth. I kept this from you, not out of shame, but out of fear. I feared the past would swallow your future, just as it did with me. I loved Thomas, but love doesn't always conquer everything. His family didn't accept me. They gave me an ultimatum. Leave you, or leave. I chose to leave. To take you with me. To hide you from all eyes, even from your own father. I know this hurt everyone. Him, Mrs. Ruth, and, in the end, you. Amara gripped the letter tightly. The voice in her mind echoed, like the wind blowing through years of silence. If you still want to know the rest, open that box. Amara placed the letter down, her hand reaching for the metal box. The small lock in front was rusty, but still opened easily. Inside was a world she had never seen. And never imagined. A brown leather-bound journal, a necklace with a teardrop-shaped pendant, a few unsent handwritten letters, and an old cassette tape with a small recorder. Amara picked up each item as though she were touching her own history. She opened the journal first. The first page had a photo pasted in. Celeste sitting by the window, pregnant, holding her belly, smiling softly. Below it read, The day you began to beat inside me. Amara reached out to touch the handwriting. On the margin of the next page, Celeste wrote, If one day you have to search for your father, don't let resentment guide you. Go with curiosity, compassion, and a heart ready to love again. Amara closed her eyes gently. The questions inside her didn't disappear, but they started to shift in form, from anger to understanding, from doubt to a longing to know everything her mother had lived. Amara opened the tape recorder, inserted the batteries according to the simple instructions attached. The cassette was already in place. She sat down, her ear close to the speaker, then pressed play. The sound was faint at first, then a woman's voice came through. Clear, warm, full of exhaustion, but strangely gentle. If you're hearing this, it's possible that I'm no longer with you. Or maybe I never got the chance to finish everything. Amara held her breath. My real name is Alina Grace. Celeste was the name I chose when I ran away. Not to escape from you, but to protect you from a world I had lost faith in. The voice paused briefly. The sound of breathing came through, so close to the ear. I once loved Thomas. Loved him so much that I thought love was enough to change an entire family. But I was wrong. Amara swallowed hard. When they found out I was pregnant, they didn't threaten me. They gave me an ultimatum. I had to leave, keep you, and disappear. Or they would take you, like a possession. She watched the tape reel turning. Each round was a piece of her childhood she hadn't known she had lost. Amara closed her eyes, listening further. I never intended for you to know. I feared that if you met him, you would choose the blood in your veins over the life that your mother and Mrs. Ruth gave their hearts to build. The voice on the tape softened. But then one day, when you were sleeping on the sofa, clutching the secret garden, I saw your face when in his face in the same moment. A sigh. I knew I couldn't keep you in the dark forever. Amara opened her eyes, her heart heavy, like water rising in a cup. On the table, the journal was open halfway. The writing began to look hurried. The ink slightly smudged as though written through tears. One day, if Thomas truly knows and wants to meet you, I hope he won't just say, I'm sorry. I hope he will say, I'm proud of you. Amara looked at the key that had unlocked everything, and suddenly understood. It didn't open a specific place. It opened the person she was becoming. The next morning, London was still covered in mist, but within Amara, everything was clearer than ever before. She wore a thick coat, tucked her mother's letter into her inner pocket, and walked downstairs. Alfred was waiting by the door, holding an umbrella, his face as still as when he first met her. "He's awake," he said. "He's at St. George's Hospital, and he requested to meet you alone." Amara nodded. She didn't know what the real feeling inside her was. Excitement? Anger? Missing someone who had never been present? Or simply ready? The black car rolled over Westminster Bridge, through the wet streets, and the sound of honking echoed across the cold city. In her mind, the fragments of memories, not just her own, but of her mother, Mrs. Ruth, and Thomas, fit together like a puzzle without a picture to follow. She wasn't going there to reclaim anything. She was going to listen, no matter what the answer might be. The elevator stopped on the 4th floor. The hospital hallway was bright and cold, quiet like a buffer zone between life and what couldn't be changed. Alfred stopped in front of room 402. "He's lucid enough to talk, but still weak," he said, stepping back, leaving Amara alone. She took a deep breath and knocked lightly. "Come in." His voice, deeper, hoarser, but unmistakable. Amara pushed the door open. Thomas Whitmore lay on the hospital bed, IVs in his arm, his face pale but his eyes still bright. And still that look, no longer arrogant, no longer cold, just fragile and real. She stood still. "Amara," he said, his voice breaking like mist. "Thank you, Austin, for coming." She didn't respond. He smiled faintly, as if accustomed to that silence his whole life. "I thought I had everything. Power, fame and status, but I didn't have a child. I didn't know I ever did." Amara walked in and sat in the chair beside the bed. She didn't say how many years he had missed. She only whispered, "I've heard everything." Thomas nodded lightly, his eyes red. "Then we can start from here, if you'll allow me." The silence that stretched between them wasn't because they had nothing to say. It was because there was so much that couldn't be said with words. Thomas looked at Amara, then out the window. The London fog covered the rooftops like a blanket hiding the past. "I've read everything your mother left behind," he said, his voice as soft as the wind through a window. "The journals, the tapes, the photos she hid in the box." Amara nodded slowly. She placed the small box on the table next to the bed. "I've read it. I've listened." Thomas exhaled slowly. "I never had the chance to protect the two of you. I couldn't abandon my family. And by the time I realized it, everything was too late." She looked at him. "So now, what do you want?" A cold but necessary question. Thomas didn't avoid it. "I don't want to redeem myself, nor do I seek forgiveness. I just want you to know that I truly want to understand you, even if it's only from now on." Amara stayed silent. Then slowly she spoke. "Well, let's start with the fact that I like peanut butter sandwiches. I hate riding the bus, and I once wished I had a father like the ones in books." Thomas chuckled, weakly but genuinely. "Well, I can learn to be the kind of father from the books if you write the first page." They sat there. A father who had once not known his child existed, and a child carrying so many unnamed gaps. Thomas opened the drawer of the bedside table, pulling out a thin file neatly bound. The cover read, "Supplementary Will, Amara Wells." "I don't need to wait for the lawyer," he said. "I want you to know beforehand. All my assets, shares, and legal representation in the will be transferred to your name." Amara looked up, motionless. "Not because you are flesh and blood," Thomas added, his gaze serious, "but because you are the only person in my life who makes me regret not living right from the start." She replied slowly, "I don't need your money." He nodded. "I know, but you need to be free to choose what you want to do with it." Silence. Amara looked at the file, then at his hand, now thin, veins clearly visible like winter branches. "I won't sign anything today," she said, "because today I only came to listen." Thomas nodded and smiled. "Then I'll be here, silent, waiting for you to speak when you're ready." And for the first time in her life, Amara felt as she was no longer the one searching. She had begun to become the one received. Late afternoon. The light outside the window had turned into a dull, gray, neon lights reflecting on the glossy hospital floor. Amara sat cross-legged on the chair, her mother's journal open on her lap. Thomas lay still, eyes closed, but not asleep. He was simply listening, with his heart. "Mrs. Ruth once told me," Amara spoke, "that my mother loved to sing, but I never heard her sing once." Thomas smiled faintly, his eyes still closed. She used to sing while cleaning, always starting with Summertime. Do you know that song? Omar's Shami nodded, her eyes slightly teary. I've heard it on the radio. He opened his eyes. Her voice wasn't loud, nor was it high, but it was sweet, like cotton candy. When she sang the last line, she would always look at me, as if no one else in the world mattered. They both fell silent. The most important things were never written in legal documents. They didn't appear in the will. There were no conditions or vows. They were in the song never heard, in the look shared during the last line of the song, and in the quiet hospital room where father and daughter were learning to call each other by name from the beginning. Before leaving the hospital that night, Amara took something small from her backpack, carefully wrapped in an old silk cloth, the teardrop-shaped necklace found in the box her mother had left behind. She placed it on the table next to the bed. This is my mother's, she said. In the journal, it says she never took it off until the day she left England. Thomas stared at the jewelry. His fingers trembled slightly as he touched the pendant. I gave it to her for her 19th birthday, he said quietly. I had to go to 3 cities to find the right stone. Gray jade, like her eyes when she was angry. Amara smiled for the first time truly. I think she kept it, not because it was beautiful, but because it was the only thing left from the time she still believed in you. Thomas looked up, staring at her for a long time. You can keep it if you want. Amara shook her head. No, it's already hers. Now, it should belong to the person who made her dare to love, even though she eventually had to leave. She got up from the chair, standing tall. I'll come back, but not to continue the questions, but to see how you answer them through your actions. The door closed behind her. Thomas looked at the necklace in his palm, a teardrop from the past, and also a faint glimmer of a future he once thought he didn't deserve to have. That night, Amara returned to the house on Wexford Street. She didn't turn on the lights. In the faint glow from the streetlights outside, she sat on the living room floor, opening the box again. But this time not to find something new, but to look back. She flipped to the back of the old photo, her mother and Thomas standing in front of Howard University. There was a small handwritten note in blue ink. Summer 99, our beginning, no matter the end. Summer 99, our beginning, no matter the end. Amara cried for the first time, not from anger, not from loss, but from something softer. Regret. Regret for a beautiful beginning that never reached the middle. Regret for a mother who once dreamed of love, then had to choose to run away. Regret for herself. For having to travel halfway across the world to finally hear 3 words. I love you. She placed the photo on the table right next to the journal, the key, and the first letter. Everything began from there. And perhaps everything must end from the place it began, with the truth, with choice, and with forgiveness. The next morning, rare sunlight streamed into the room where Amara had fallen asleep among papers and memories. On the table, aside from the journal and letter, there was an unfinished draft. Thomas's handwriting. 30 pages numbered in red ink with a draft title, A Letter to the One Who Never Knew He Was a Father. Amara flipped through the first few pages. It wasn't a will, it wasn't a justification, it was a confession. And also a story. I don't know how to be a father. I've never learned how to be trustworthy, but when I saw you standing in the middle of the plane, I didn't see a little girl. I saw the last chance to live truthfully. She read on. If you forgive me, forgive your mother first, because she kept you away from the worst parts of me. Beneath that was a crossed-out line, then a new one, more tremulous. If you never forgive me, I will still be grateful that you came. Amara put the draft down. Her hands trembled, not with anger, but with compassion. The man who had everything, yet was the most powerless when trying to hold on to the most valuable thing, a chance to be called father. The gloomy afternoon, light rain falling outside the hospital window. Thomas sat on the chair, his hand resting lightly on the pillow. There's something I haven't told you, he began, his voice trembling. Amara looked at him, waiting. I was so afraid I would never get a chance to be a father. Afraid I would be condemned by the world. Afraid you would hate me. He fell silent, his eyes distant. But now, when you've come, I'm not afraid anymore. I just hope you understand that I love you in my own way. Amara took a deep breath. Silent tears fell. I don't need a perfect father. I just need a father who's sincere. Thomas smiled softly, his eyes bright. That's what I can give you, and I will never give up. The next day, London was still gray, But in Amara's heart there was a glimmer of light. She stood by the hospital room window looking out at the rain-soaked streets. Beside her was Thomas, still weak, but his gaze had a new vitality. Amara gently reached out, taking his hand. "We'll move forward together, right?" Thomas squeezed her hand tightly, nodding. "Yes, my daughter. We'll start again from the beginning." A phone rang, breaking the stillness. Amara picked up the phone, her voice trembling. "Who is it?" The voice on the other end said, "Is this Amara Wells? This is the Whitmore family's lawyer. We have some important documents and information we need to discuss." Amara looked at Thomas, knowing that their journey was far from over. But now she wasn't afraid. She was ready for the next secrets. In the evening, in the small living room of the house on Wexford Street, Amara and Thomas opened the documents sent by the Whitmore lawyer. The thick pages, stamped in red, clearly stated Amara Wells as the sole heir. There were property transfer contracts, company shares, and notably, a private letter from Thomas to Amara. "This isn't just about wealth," Thomas said, his eyes on the papers. "It's about legacy, responsibility, and an apology that was never spoken." Amara read each line carefully, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on her small shoulders. She knew the truth wasn't just in war drawers, but in these cold, hard papers, and she would have to learn to accept it in order to move forward. Late at night, as London fell into sleep, Amara sat by the window of her room, holding her mother's journal. She reread the final words where her mother wrote about dreams, not for herself, but for her daughter. "You will be free, strong, and able to love more than I ever could. Though I can't be there, I will always be the mother, silently watching over you from afar." Amara sighed, her eyes full of sadness, but also determination. She closed her eyes, imagining her distant mother, the one who had sacrificed everything for her to live and be loved. And in her heart a small promise began to grow. "I will not let those sacrifices be in vain." The next morning Amara called home to Mrs. Ruth. Her voice was weak but filled with joy. "My dear, hearing your voice puts my mind at ease." Amara spoke gently. "Grandma, I'm in London. I won't be returning right away, but I want you to know I'm on my journey." Mrs. Ruth choked back tears. "I've always believed you would find your way, no matter how difficult." Amara smiled softly. "I won't let anyone in my family feel alone anymore. Don't worry." They both fell silent for a moment, only hearing the deep sighs full of love over the phone. Amara's journey was not just about searching for the truth, but also about mending the broken threads of her family. The first day back at the hospital, Amara and Thomas stepped outside into the cold air of the hospital courtyard, breathing in the crisp air. She felt each step as a new milestone on their healing journey. "Father is much better now," she said, smiling. Thomas looked at her, his eyes warm. "And so are you, Amara. We will continue together." They both walked toward the main door, where the light from outside shone, opening up an unclear yet hopeful future. In Amara's heart, the pain gradually gave way to strength and love. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she was no longer alone. She had found a family, in her own way. Back at the house on Wexford Street, Amara opened a small wooden box Thomas had given her before leaving the hospital. Inside were old items: a pocket watch, some unsent letters, and a photo of a family from long ago. Thomas, Celeste, and a small child. "This is the family your father never told you about," Thomas had said over the phone, his voice warm. Amara looked at the photo, feeling both distant and close. "I'll keep it, as a reminder of what's been lost and what's still here." The watch ticked softly, like time continuing to flow, reminding her that every moment is precious, and every step is a choice to heal. In the days that followed, London began to warm with the gentle arrival of spring. Amara and Thomas walked together through the tree-lined streets, sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting shimmering patterns on the road. She realized that, despite the pain of the past, there was still joy to be found in each present moment. Thomas shared stories of his youth, of times he dreamed of being a father and the mistakes he had made. Amara smiled faintly, feeling the connection slowly forming between them. Spring wasn't just a change in nature. It was the revival of the hearts and hope for a new beginning. One peaceful afternoon, Amara received an unexpected call from lawyer Alfred. "Do you want to know about Celine?" he asked. Celine, the real biological mother of Amara, the woman Mrs. Ruth and Thomas had mentioned but never revealed. Alfred sent her a file containing photos, letters, and legal documents related to her mother's life before she left. Amara flipped through the pages, discovering a young woman full of strength and ambition, but also carrying deep pain and secrets. She realized that her journey was not just about Thomas, but also about the woman who had given birth to her, the woman she needed to learn to understand and forgive. On Amara's 13th birthday, Thomas hosted a small celebration at the Wexford Street house. There weren't many guests, just close family friends and Mrs. Ruth, who had flown in from the U.S. Amara wore a light blue dress, her eyes shining, but still a bit overwhelmed by the newfound attention. Thomas gave her a gift, a necklace with a blue stone pendant identical to her mother's necklace. "This is part of the family," he said, his voice warm. Amara smiled softly, feeling the acceptance and love she once thought was a distant dream. That day, she was no longer the lonely girl on the flight. She was Amara, the daughter of two people, and the one who had chosen her future. One quiet afternoon, Amara sat by the window in her small room in London, sunlight gently streaming through the glass, casting light on her thoughtful face. The phone rang, and the screen lit up with Mrs. Lillian's image, the elderly nurse who had been with her throughout the journey. Her voice was warm but filled with experience. "Do you know courage is in the absence of fear? It's the willingness to keep walking, even in the face of it. You've been very courageous." Amara smiled, her eyes glowing with faith and strength. "I understand now, Grandma. Courage isn't just standing before others, but facing the truth within myself." Mrs. Lillian nodded, her eyes full of pride. "And the road ahead will have many challenges, but you're no longer alone." Amara took a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever came. "I will keep moving forward, because courage has become an inseparable part of me." That morning, Amara stood before the court in London, her heart pounding but filled with resolve. Beside her was Alfred, the lawyer who had helped her since the beginning. Today was not just a ceremony for inheritance, but a turning point in her life. She was officially recognized as the sole heir of Thomas Whitmore, the father she was just beginning to understand and connect with. Amara's eyes sparkled with pride, but also with a little apprehension about the new responsibilities. Alfred handed her the certificate, his smile gentle. "Congratulations, Amara. This is the beginning of a new chapter in your life." Amara nodded, feeling the maturity growing within her. She entered the courtroom, no longer a 12-year-old girl, but a strong young woman, ready to continue her own story with her own hands. After the trial, Amara and Thomas walked outside, the afternoon sunlight dancing on the streets of London. They walked together, not just as father and daughter, but as two people rebuilding a long broken relationship. Thomas held Amara's hand, his voice gentle. "I know I've lost many precious years, but from now on I want to give everything to you." Amara looked at him, feeling the sincerity and determination. "I want to start over too, Father. Together, not alone." They strolled through the ancient streets amidst the sound of cars and people laughing. In Amara's heart, a new belief began to blossom. No matter how complicated the past was, the future could still be rewritten with love and forgiveness. Their father-daughter relationship was no longer a burden, but a hope for a new, meaningful journey. One day, while cleaning Thomas's old room, Amara discovered a small, locked wooden box. The box had no key, but inside was a letter and a few other mementos. The handwritten letter, with a sad, heavy tone. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you directly. There are things I had to hide to protect you, but there are also things I fear facing myself." Amara felt the gravity of this secret. The letter revealed a shocking truth. Thomas was not only her biological father, but also involved in a deep family conspiracy that could change Amara's life forever. She stood at the crossroads of truth and choice. Continue to explore or let go of the past to live in the present. Amara sat in the living room, the wooden box placed on the table in front of her. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter, each line cutting into her heart. Thomas wrote about family secrets, about tacit agreements, and decisions that had kept him distant from her and her mother since she was young. He admitted his mistakes, but also warned that continuing to search for answers might bring unforeseen consequences. Amara looked out the window, the rain sliding down the glass like tears that hadn't fallen. She realized that facing the past wasn't just about courage, it was the greatest challenge of her life, and she had to decide whether she had the strength to move forward or would let go to protect herself. Late at night, Amara sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars. She thought about the letter, the family secrets, and the future waiting ahead. In her heart, the struggle between continuing to seek the truth and holding on to the peace of the present became intense. Amara remembered Mrs. Ruth's words. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking forward despite it. With newfound courage, she quietly decided she would not run away. She would face every truth, no matter how painful. Because only by doing so could she truly heal and move forward, no longer bound by the past. The next day, Amara contacted Alfred. asking for a direct meeting to discuss the newly discovered secrets. She knew this journey wouldn't be easy, but determination had filled her thoughts. Alfred arranged an appointment at the office where they would open up the untold stories. Amara prepared thoroughly, bringing all the documents and emotions that had yet to be released. In front of the mirror, she looked herself in the eye, the girl who had overcome so many challenges, ready to continue. The first step toward the truth, no matter how rocky, was the first step toward freedom and true healing. In the lawyer's office, Amara opened the final envelope, containing detailed files about the Whitmore family and secret agreements from many years ago. Lawyer Alfred explained the contracts concerning property transfers and inheritance rights, but more importantly, the evidence of internal family conflicts and conspiracies that had led to her mother's departure from Thomas. Amara felt each line cut deep, but at the same time it was a guiding light. She knew that no matter how complex the truth was, it was necessary for her to understand her roots, accept the past, and walk freely into the future. A new chapter was waiting for her to open, with strength and trust like never before. Amara stood before the door, the brass key in her hand. She took a deep breath, feeling every moment of the journey that had led her here. The losses, the truths, and the courage that had helped her arrive. The key in her hand didn't just open the door, it opened her future. The door swung open. Light poured in, warm and full of hope. Amara stepped inside, no longer the 12-year-old girl, but a grown woman. She whispered, her voice gentle yet resolute, "The past may be painful, but the truth is always worth opening up to." And beyond that door, a new life was waiting for her. A life filled with love, healing, and hope that would never fade.